You said, "Is everyone okay down there?" Because there was like shouting and yelling and laughter and all kinds of loud noises coming from coming from the session room that I was in. And I was like, "Oh no, they're having the time of their lives." Welcome back to Listen to the Helpers, a podcast created by the Fred Rogers Institute to elevate the voices of helpers everywhere. Fred Rogers once said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" Today, Kenzee and I will be reflecting on our 2026 Work of Fred Rogers Conference. This is our practice-focused and practice-informed conference inspired by the legacy of Fred Rogers through sessions by child-serving professionals. Kenzee, we just finished our 2026 Work of Fred Rogers conference. At the time of recording this episode, we are just coming off of our 2-day conference. We spent almost a whole year planning for this conference, and we just finished it. We just had 250 people in our Fred Rogers Institute building.
And I should note, Sarah, you just told me this morning that you found a mail, like a calendar invite from August of 2025 to discuss July of 2026's Work of Fred Rogers Conference. So it quite literally takes us a year to figure out a game plan, figure out next year's dates, all of the fun stuff. And I should note that we do have a relatively small team. So the Work of Fred Rogers Conference with 200 plus people, it's the seven of us putting it together. So it's not only I want to give ourselves a pat on the back, but just thank you to everyone who came too.
Yes, you're so right. It takes a whole year to plan this, and since our calendar invite for our initial planning for the 2026 conference went out in August, that means that we are just about ready to start planning for 2027 now. And yeah, there's only 7 of us that work at the Fred Rogers Institute full time. We also have a graduate assistant who helped out tremendously during this year's conference and leading up to it. But yeah, the 7 of us full time is a small but mighty team that put together this conference. And this year was our 4th annual Work of Fred Rogers conference, and it has grown so incredibly much because this year was the first year ever that we sold out. We were at absolute capacity. We filled the building. We used every single room in our building. Our Fred Rogers Institute office is within a conference center building on the campus of St. Vincent College. So we're fortunate enough to be able to have it conveniently on site for us, but we did. We used every single seat in every single room in the whole building, and it was packed. It was truly packed, but in the best way because we got to see so many smiling faces. We got to see lots of familiar faces from people who have come year after year, people who have been involved in our Educators Neighborhood programming, people who have just been in our world in some way over the past several years. And we also got to see lots of new faces and meet some new neighbors as well. So that was obviously such a joy as well. Kenzee, can you give like a vague overview of what the Work of Fred Rogers Conference is for anybody who's listening who didn't attend this year or is hearing about it for the first time? How would you describe Work of Fred?
Oh my gosh. Well, first and foremost, so much fun, if I could describe it in 3 words. But otherwise, I would say it is a group of like-minded individuals, all serving children or wanting to serve children in some way, attending different sessions from individuals either within their own context or from a different context, um, sharing about their work and the great things that they do, all connected to Fred in some way, whether it's a direct connection, such as, like a puppet session, or it's someone who shares the similar values to Fred and kind of describes it and shares it with a group. And it's very, like you said earlier, practice focused and practice informed. And you come out of it with a lot of great takeaways, which leads me to ask you, do you have a particularly favorite session that you attended?
So the good news is all of the sessions that I was able to attend were fabulous. The bad news is I wasn't able to attend all of the sessions. Since there are so few of us, I know we all got to attend a session here and there throughout the 2 days. Our conference is 2 full days. It has been for the past couple of years. We had a total of 46 different sessions plus two incredible opening keynotes, one on each day of the conference. That means 48, including the keynotes. That's 48 plus a handful of presenters because some of those sessions had co-presenters or two or three or four co-presenters. So we had a lot of sessions to choose from. They were all really wonderful. Some of my favorites, which I wanna really dive into, a couple of our favorites here, but one of them that I attended that I really loved was called Joyful Disruption: Becoming Helpers by Interrupting Harm with Care, Connection, and Joy. This session was presented by Dr. Marvin Reed. He is an assistant principal at Dublin Unified School District. And his was one of the first sessions of the day. His was actually the very first. There was the opening keynote, and then we had the very first round of breakout sessions on the first day of the conference. So aside from that opening keynote, his was the first session that I got to attend. Um, and I knew that it was going to be, it's called Joyful Disruption, but I knew it was going to be joyful before I even walked in the room because I could hear the music that he was playing and like the little intermission time while people were finding their spaces and finding their seats. And he was playing this like really, really upbeat, positive, welcoming kind of instrumental music. And as I was kind of wandering around, wondering, should I attend this one? And I heard the music, and I thought, okay, this one's gonna be a good one. So, yeah, his was really excellent. Kenzie, were you able to peek in on his at all?
I saw exactly one moment of his, and it was Cyndi Lauper playing, and he was throwing like I think candy.
Starburst.
He was
Yeah.
Starburst, and everyone see like you could hear like from very far away how excited people were and how happy they were. Like it was just seemed like a good time, and I have so much FOMO because I missed it.
Yeah, it was a good one. And yes, that's how he started the session by throwing out some Starburst. And he had a bit of an icebreaker to start us all off. And depending on which Starburst color you chose at your table, that was associated with a particular question. So he had a slide projected up in the front, and it was like, if you have pink, this is your question. If you have orange, this is your question. Yellow, this is your question, and so on. So I think the question that I answered was, what is your go-to vacation snack and or drink? And actually I'll pose that to you, Kenzie. What's your go-to vacation snack or drink?
I always feel like I love a good Gatorade. So
That's
I
good,
really
especially for in the sun. You need those electrolytes.
right, and it's always a safe bet, right? So, and my favorite Gatorade flavor is probably the orange flavor or like the fruit punch flavor.
Interesting.
And snack wise, I usually go for a good gummy. I love a
Mm,
gummy or like a kettle chip.
I can relate. I can relate. My go-to vacation snack is always watermelon Sour Patch Kids. They feel summery because it's watermelon, and also you get the sour, you get the sweet, you get the, you know,
Mhm.
chewy. It's fun. It's fun. And yeah. So um that was a really fun way to start off his session by just some like silly and friendly kind of icebreaker questions. And then he talked about how he uses he did a couple of activities like that that were lighthearted and fun and intended to just build kind of a sense of community. And he talked about how he uses those with students, and he gave us kind of the abridged version of them. And he also one thing that he did to get the group's attention, to get the room's attention, because his session was held in our main banquet room, so people were a little bit more spread out, and I feel like it's harder to get people's attention in that room sometimes because people are sitting more spread out and there might be a touch more, more bodies in there than some of the other rooms. So to get people's attention, instead of doing like the clapping and you repeat the pattern, or instead of like whistling or something that's really loud and like attention grabbing, he said, if you can hear me, take a deep breath in. And immediately everyone went and took their deep breath in. And then he said, okay, into the microphone, okay, now take a deep breath out. And he had like the most soothing voice too. He was like able to be loud and fun, but also like when he was doing this, it like felt like I was like listening to a guided meditation. It was really nice. But yeah, take a deep breath in. Okay, now take a deep breath out. And now one more time, take a deep breath in. And that was like I've never heard somebody use that as an attention grabber for a classroom or for a group of people or for literally anything. Um, it worked perfectly, and it was like a nice little reset of like, okay, took my deep breath in and out, and now I'm ready to listen again. So I thought that was really cool, and I'm definitely going to use that with college students and with, if we do our speaking engagements. I feel like that's like a trick that we should try and see if it works for us. Something else that I really appreciated that he did another similar kind of icebreaker activity with some different, with a question. But he talked about how with students, he encourages them to answer whatever the question was, however they want. So they can answer it with pictures or with words or um, a name of a song that comes to mind when they have this thought, or um, just to make it more accessible and interesting and fun and less pressure and more about building connection. That was the whole theme of that particular session. It was all about building relationships. And Dr. Martin Reed as a presenter was really excellent at building that community and building those connections. I felt like just sitting in on this session, he made a big banquet room feel like a warm and welcoming space, and he made me feel like I like knew him and like we were good friends. And even though, I mean, I had emailed him with presenter details before the conference, but I didn't actually even get a chance to talk to him one-on-one during the conference. So I feel like that says something if he's able to make people feel that way, even without those one-on-one conversations, especially as an educator. That's a really important skill to have and a hard thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was like peeking in and out, like he was frequently on the move. Like he
Hmm.
had the lavalier mic on him,
Yeah.
and like he'd stop at like each table.
Yeah.
That was super sweet because he didn't have to do that. Like, he could have just stood at the podium like you said, and but he made it more personal that way.
Yeah, absolutely. What was one of your favorite sessions that you attended, or maybe even not favorite because it's too hard to pick a favorite, but what is a session that you really enjoyed?
One of my favorite sessions at this year's conference, and even like at all of the conferences throughout, the 4 years that we've had Worker Fred Rogers conferences, was Drawing Mr. J, Exploring Social Emotional Learning Through Drawing Challenges by Jonathan Jurovich. And something, to provide background to Mr. J, he is equal parts a art teacher and he hosts like a drawing show on YouTube. And they're very short videos, I'd say like at most 5 minutes. And not only does he teach children how to draw like a quick sketch, but he also embeds in social emotional learning within it as well, and opportunities for children to kind of get creative and explore. He leaves it a little bit open-ended, which I really like. I wish
Mhm.
I had it in front of me, but you and I were both in this one, and we both drew flying horses.
Yes, yeah.
And you could draw the horse with like a propeller, or he left it a little open-ended and he was telling us how like some kids draw wings or other like flying contraptions. And it was just so interesting and so practical, something that we could use in our own spaces. Like, heck, you even used it with your son. Like,
Yeah.
something so simple yet so creative and so like heartwarming because he was talking to us about how much his students connected with one another and really like this activity and how people have implemented it in different schools in different states. And I don't know, I just thought it was so interesting and he seemed like such a charismatic guy as well.
Yeah, I loved his whole personality, like made the session what it was, truly. I had like a few notes that I was writing down during his session, and one of my bullet points says that I just really believe that he seemed like he was so comfortable in his own skin. Like he just gave off the impression of like he knows what he's doing, and also if he doesn't know what he's doing, he seems so fun and so approachable and so just comfortable. It's just one of those personalities that you kind of gravitate towards. And I can see even seeing him in the context of being a presenter at this big conference, um, I can still see him being such an important presence in a classroom with a student. I can totally imagine him building such positive relationships with his students. Um, And he showed us a few clips of his quick draw challenge YouTube series, and he also does that series is also on. He's from Ohio. It's on his Ohio PBS station. He was fortunate enough to get that partnership going to have it on that PBS station too. And he showed us a few clips, and you can see it through the screen too. And he talked a lot about his inspiration from Fred Rogers and how he thinks about the connection that he felt with Fred through the screen and how he hopes to kind of have that kind of connection or at least spark conversations through the screen in that way. And his quick draw challenge videos are by no means like Fred Rogers or Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. They're two just different things, but you can tell that he's inspired by that sense of connection and wanting to encourage that sense of connection with that form of media. So that was really cool to see his inspiration, like hear about his inspiration and then see it in that way. I also made a note that he talked about those quick draw challenges as, and I have this in quotes, a catalyst to build conversations. So you talking about how like the social emotional learning was embedded, I loved the way that he phrased that, that they're a catalyst to build conversations. I thought that was really cool.
I also love how inclusive it is
Mhm.
because not only can you, and he said, like, I try to keep them short, but anyone is welcome to pause and, try to catch up and then take as much time as they need. And he talked about that in his classroom as well because there was an attendee who asked a really quick question of, like, how do you make this inclusive, especially with individuals who might need a little bit more time? And he says, like, his students can always, while the time that they spend working on it might stop, they know that they can always pick it back up and return to it later. It's not final, which I really love how he made that a point to say that.
I also I remember him saying that somebody else had a question in the session and asked, have you seen any change in your students or how they approach their art? Because, he's an art educator, and have you seen any changes in them just in general after starting these kind of quick draw challenges with them? And he talked about how after introducing those, he found that he was hearing a lot less I can'ts with other projects, like, oh, I can't do that, or I don't know how to do that, or that's impossible. I just can't. And more of he talked about, I'm paraphrasing here, but he talked about less of seeing something as like a mountain we can't climb and more as like a task that can be broken down into smaller parts. Because in his quick draw videos and in when he does it, live, he literally breaks down the drawing into different parts. Like he had us draw a horse, like you mentioned. Like he said, like, okay, let's draw two little carrots for, ears, and let's draw a line for the neck and a line for the back and a big belly. And like it's a step-by-step instruction. Um, because when you see it at first, it's like, oh, I can't draw a horse. I've never drawn a horse. I don't know how to do that. But wait, let's break it down into smaller steps and maybe we can do it. And maybe it'll look different from yours and his and mine. They'll all look different and that's okay, but maybe it's not impossible. So I love that he talked about that being a way to reduce the I can'ts and make them more of I can do this and let's just take it into smaller steps and smaller pieces.
Yeah, and it's so not only that, but it's just so student centered. Like something else that he described is that he has like a box in his classroom where students can send suggestions about his next like videos or in-person like drawing activities. And he actually does do like he checks the box out frequently, and students can pick the prompts, and he kind of just acts it out, which I thought was so cool. Like it must
Yeah.
feel so good to not only like because I remember being in elementary school and my ELA teacher had a similar activity where she'd give us a prompt or she'd let us pick out prompts and we'd get to like write a short story based on the prompt and then we would vote on the best story and we'd have it hang up in our room each week.
Oh,
And
wow.
it kind of made me connect to that and it is meaningful for students. Like you figure this was probably like I don't know, 15 years ago and I still remember that. So they're going to remember this years down the line.
It makes you feel special and like you belong.
Yeah.
Were there any other sessions that you really loved from the 2 days of our conference this year?
I attended another one called The Playful Heart, Preventing Burnout by Rediscovering the Joy of Learning Together. This session is by Amy Reyes Huff, who is a state early learning specialist in Wyoming, and Dr. Marissa Macy, who is a professor of early childhood education at the University of Wyoming. And we had the opportunity to meet Marissa because she reached out to us to be on her podcast I want to say earlier this year.
Yeah,
And
it was a little while ago. Yeah.
and not even knowing that she was going to be a presenter at Work or Fred, or like we didn't even make connect that until a little bit afterwards. And so getting to meet her in person and getting to hear about her presentation was really cool. And it really does connect with our own work and Fred's work because they talked about the importance of simple interactions and how they can foster joy and connection in our learning environments. And that obviously simple interactions is what we do at the Fred Rogers Institute. So getting to hear about that was super cool. I don't know if you got to peek your head in on that one at all.
I unfortunately didn't get to peek my head in on that session, but I loved hearing about it from your perspective, and I loved seeing, you and I are two of the screeners for all of the proposals, and we get all of the materials from the presenters. So I was able to see some of her materials, some of their materials ahead of time. So that was really neat, and it was fun to get to meet her in person after, the communication over email for the conference, but then also after being able to have the two of us were guests on her podcast, like you mentioned. So we got to meet her on Zoom, but that was one of our somewhat familiar faces that was exciting to see in person. I love when we get a chance to do that, and especially when we have like educators neighborhood people who we are with all year long and see over Zoom, and then we get to see them in person sometimes and meet people who are in our small groups or people who just we've known but haven't really seen. It's a funny experience, but it's really cool. I always love that kind of thing. One of the ones that I really loved from day two was a session called Yes and Using Improv Techniques and Games in Social Emotional Learning. Um, the presenters of this Yes and session were Matt Austin, who is an improv educator, and Jessica Chesbro, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Matt and Jessica are husband and wife, so it was really, really special to see them present this session together. They were great co-presenters, and I can tell that they are great co-life partners because they were such a fun combination together, and um, yeah, I feel like fun is the best word to describe it. They were just having so much fun presenting this. The people in their session were having the time of their lives. And I think at one point I think this was a session that you were helping out with the table of all our t-shirts and things because you were sitting upstairs and I was downstairs in this session and I had to step out a few minutes early and I came upstairs with a huge smile on my face and you said, "Is everyone okay down there?" Because there was like shouting and yelling and laughter and all kinds of loud noises coming from coming from the session room that I was in. And I was like, "Oh no, they're having the time of their lives. Like is everybody okay? They're more than okay." They're like cackling down there. They're having so much fun. But not only was it fun, it was also a really interesting connection that they made between the six fundamentals of learning and growing, which we talk about obviously on every episode of this podcast, and improv and just the idea of improv. They talked about learning through joy and fun and play and making connections and that being present is one of the fundamentals of improv. I pulled up again because we had access to their slides. I pulled up one of their slides because I wanted to refer to it in this episode. They had a slide that was like six fundamentals of learning and growing on one side, and then what's called the fundamentals of improv on the other. And they had us well, I was kind of a fly on the wall. I was listening to the discussions, but they had all of the people participating in the session think about and talk about the connections between. So, for example, we have the six fundamentals of learning and growing. One of them is a sense of trust. One of the fundamentals of improv is to take risks and be bold. And then one person in the session said those go hand in hand because you have to be in a place with people that you can trust to be able to take risks and be bold. Somebody else said you have to have a sense of self-worth to be able to take risks and be bold. You have to feel kind of comfortable in your own skin to feel comfortable to take those risks. And that doesn't just apply to this idea of improv. I mean, of course it does. You have to definitely be able to be in those places emotionally, mentally, physically to be able to do any sort of improv and be creative. But that's like life, right? And that's one of the things that Matt and Jessica talked about in their session is improv is not just putting on a performance. We do improv every single day of our lives when we talk to people. We're just kind of making it up as we go sometimes. That's again, I'm paraphrasing, but they did say like we do improv every day of our lives, even just like as normal people, not as performers. Um,
Yeah, it makes me think of my favorite Fred clip of him and neighbor Aber dancing with Ella Jenkins. Because I don't
yes,
think that's necessarily improv, but you can see that there were elements where I don't think Fred expected Ella to be as fast in her dance moves as she was. And he would like mess up a little bit, and that was okay because he was totally all smiles and happy. And that makes me think of improv and what you're describing now. He's
that's
taking
so true. No, that's so true because you can even tell in that clip, I think it's highly unlikely that Fred practiced that dance ahead of time. I think that was on the spot, real time. I think Ella Jenkins said, let's do this. And he said, okay. And then they did it. So, yeah, that's actually a great connection, a great example. Um, I also liked in Matt and Jessica's session after talking about like the cross connections between the six fundamentals of learning and growing and the improv fundamentals. They went through each of the six fundamentals of learning and growing, or at least they tried to. They ran out of time because people were having so much fun doing the activities that they were like, here's our slides. We can't get through the rest of them. But they started to go through each of the six with improv activities that you could use in a classroom with your colleagues as team building that directly related to practicing and building and growing in those areas of the six, which was so neat. Um, for example, one of the trust activities, which I had to step out a bit during the session to attend to something, and then I stepped back in, and they were in the middle of this activity, and I could not stop smiling watching everybody do this activity. The activity was called Yes and Picnic. So they got in this big circle around the room, and they were telling the story, and this is like I've heard of this game before, so I feel like this might not be unfamiliar to you or people listening, but um, you say I'm going on a picnic and I'm bringing a deck of cards, and then the next person has to say I'm going on a picnic and I'm bringing a deck of cards and a bottle of lemonade, and like and then you have to repeat the next like what everybody said leading up to it, and so they were participating in this, and there was I don't know maybe 45 people in this session. Like there were so many people in this session and like the seats were filled. People were sitting on the floor. There were a bunch of people around this circle trying to do this game and so many things to remember obviously because of that. And they were all kind of helping each other out and it would get to like the 12th person and they're repeating everybody's things trying to remember and they'd be like I'm bringing and everybody would be like whispering or like trying to mime out what it is, like trying to give them hints of like it's a dog or like whatever it is, and they were just laughing and when the game was over, Matt and Jessica were talking about like, don't you guys feel more connected to each other now after like having that experience together and having fun together and helping each other, supporting each other, and you could feel the energy in the room shift before and after that activity. So I thought that, and then they talked about that related to that fundamental of a sense of trust, and how that is like we just created a foundation where we can start to build some trusting relationships now. So that was a really neat experience. I really enjoyed that session, and it was so much fun. That was towards the end of day two, so people were tired and um, kind of was starting to wind down from the conference, but they were able to lift people right back up to get through that last little bit of the afternoon on day two. So that was really exciting.
And I will say, kind of connecting to this idea of building relationships with others, the amount of people that have told me throughout the 2 days about like friendships that they made and connections that
Yeah.
they made is just so sweet. Like, and we haven't said this yet, but during the conference, we welcomed people from 36 states and two other countries aside from the US. I think it was the UK and Canada. Like that's
Mhm.
absolutely wild. To
Yeah.
have them come to our very small town outside of Pittsburgh. Like, and to have that connector to be Fred is so incredibly special.
Yeah, and all of those people doing so many different things. Some of them are classroom teachers, some of them are therapists, some of them are creators and artists, and some of them work in higher ed with college age students or pre-service teachers. And the list goes on and on. They do some are puppeteers. We had so many different people doing so many different things, and it's really it feels really rewarding for us selfishly to see all these people come together because we do put a lot of hard work into making it happen, and then to see all their smiling faces and hear them talk about those friendships and hear them excited to come back next year and see people come back year after year, that's a really special thing. And it feels good to it's such a good feeling to think about um how they will hopefully bring things that they've learned into their practice and with the people that couldn't come to the conference, and hopefully continue to share that like a ripple effect.
Mhm.
What did you think of the keynotes? We have to talk about the keynotes. We had two amazing opening keynotes, one in the morning of day one and one in the morning of day two. Kenzee, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on these wonderful opening keynotes we had this year.
Yeah, so our opening keynote was Dr. Michelle Figlar, and she does so much, so many amazing things, but she is the executive director of the Birmingham Foundation in Pittsburgh, and she also serves as our McGinley Fellow. And Michelle has been absolutely amazing, and we just loved getting to hear her speak. And her topic was When the World Feels Loud, Leading with Quiet Courage. And she studied in the archive with Emily all around what Fred had to say about leadership. And she talked a lot about the importance of quiet leadership and compassionate leadership.
Michelle talked so much about this idea of being present, and that I don't even want to say unexpectedly because it's not much of a surprise, but we didn't intend for the idea of being present to be a through line throughout the whole rest of the conference. But somehow she set that tone at the very beginning of the day of being present, and then it all just kind of fell in line with that idea of being present. Every session, every conversation I overheard, every interaction that I saw, it all had this undertone of being present and being in the moment and being responsive to the people that you're with, listening, truly listening, not listening to respond, but listening carefully, as we say with the six fundamentals. And I thought that was a really beautiful thing that she was able to kind of unknowingly predict what the next 2 days that would follow her talk would look like with that idea of being present.
Right. And people really took it to heart. Like, not only, like you said, there were other presentations that talked about the importance of presence, but also there were a few sessions we both attended where we said that the active listening in these rooms are
Oh
like
my
off
gosh.
the charts. Like, so
Yes.
much head nodding and and so many like really insightful questions and conversations that, like, again, I truly think that it was Michelle's impact that set the scene and made this conference as beautiful as it was.
Yeah, she really did set a perfect tone for the whole conference.
And
Tell me
then
about the tell me about day two's opening keynote. So for those of you listening who were not able to attend the conference or didn't see about it on our social media, we had Michael Threets, who is the current host of Reading Rainbow on YouTube, and he was our opening keynote for day two.
what can I say? Beforehand, I was super excited about Michael. And these are conversations we had prior. I've been a fan of Michael's since he was a full-time librarian still, and he just started breaking out on social media. So to actually get to meet him in person and for him to be as lovely as he is,
Yeah.
in front, like face to face in on screen, was so beautiful. And he brought so much joy into the room. Like if Michelle set the scene for day one, Michael set the scene for day two, especially when he
Mhm.
talks about joy, whether it's in a library space or joy with others. And it was just so beautiful. Is there anything that you took away from his keynote?
Um, I thought, yeah, I couldn't have said it better than what you said. It was joyful. He was joyful. It was joyful. It was inspiring. I I didn't know what to expect if I'm being completely honest because he didn't have any slides. That's like a really that's a really small detail, but as I was, getting all of the information from all of the presenters and making sure all of the logistics were set, making sure all of their slides looked okay and worked all right and videos were accessible and everything that they needed was in place. Um, and I asked him for his slides ahead of time so that we could have it set up and ready to go for him the morning of his presentation. And he said, "Oh, I don't have any." And I thought, okay.
What a skill.
I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I was a little bit nervous because I've never heard him, I've seen him on Reading Rainbow, but I never heard him speak. And to say you don't have slides, like you said, that is a skill. And I have to trust that he's gonna do well. And like, you're a professional. I know you got this, but also as the behind the scenes manager of things, that's stressing me out a little bit. But he got up there and may I say, his time management was excellent. He left somehow the perfect amount of time for Q&A. He had a handful of excellent questions at the end and answered them, and then bada bing, bada boom, it was 10 a.m. and we were ready to move on to the next part of the day. So that blew my expectations out of the water because I figured he was going to do great, but the logistics of it I was really impressed with, and the content was absolutely incredible. He talked about, his story of growing up as a library kid and um, how that really shaped who he is and who he was and who he will be. He talked about his journey with his mental health, his ongoing journey with his mental health. He talked about a little bit about why he talks so openly about his mental health, and that was really impactful too. Um, I think at the beginning of his keynote, I remember him saying, um, I want to let you know you might cry during this, and I definitely saw some people with tears in their eyes during that keynote because of how moving his story was, and how inspiring he is just as a person and as an educator. Um, I like that he talked about, how kids say to him like, how did you do this? Like, how did you get to be the host of Reading Rainbow? Like, how can I do that? Or can I do something like that? And how'd you get so successful? And he was like, I don't know. I just am being myself, and I guess that's where life took me. And then he mentioned, which we talk about a lot in our work, he mentioned the idea of being okay with saying I don't know to hard questions or big questions. And I did appreciate that because, yeah, sometimes we just don't know, and that's okay.
I do want to give a shout out to the Q&A questions. Like
Yeah,
my favorite one, and I have, again, equally, I have to give a shout out to Nathaniel, who was a guest on our podcast. He asked a really
yeah,
good question to Michael about what he does with the mad that he feels. And he kind of talked about, I think, deep breaths and the five senses, like five things you can see, four things you can, something like that. Uh,
yeah.
in a bunch of really concrete, intangible ways. Not only can children deal with the mad that they feel, but us as adults can also deal with our mad as well and our big feelings.
Yeah, I totally agree that he gave some really tangible practices and ideas that people could walk away with thinking like not only did I hear an incredible story from Michael, but like I really did learn something that I'm going to use now. Yeah, the questions were incredible. That was probably my favorite question that somebody asked of him. Um, And then, of course, at the end, there was a kind attendee who just told him thank you. I remember she was sitting towards the front and she said, I want to speak on behalf of the whole room and say thank you for being here. And then she went on a little bit about that, and that was a really wonderful way to kind of wrap up his time with us at the Fred Rogers Institute. And yeah, we're so lucky that he was able and willing to join us for that event. And same thing with Michelle. We had two really excellent keynotes this year. We always have excellent speakers and presenters, and I just I'm always feeling like, okay, this was the best one yet. And then this year I'm feeling like this was the best one yet. And I remember I leaned over to somebody, it might have been you. I leaned over to somebody at some point during day two and I said, "How are we gonna top this for next year?" And I don't know. Like, we just keep bringing these, it's not even us. It's these wonderful educators, these wonderful helpers, these wonderful people keep wanting more from Fred and keep wanting to extend Fred's legacy. And they make our job really easy because they're doing the helping and we're just trying to help them help. But they're we just keep finding these incredible people wanting to do incredible things and doing incredible things.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we do a lot of great things at our job and a lot of fun things. I think the Work of Fred Rogers conference might be my favorite 2 days out of the year.
I think so too. I feel the same way.
While it does take us a year to plan it, it always goes well. And if, something bad happens, like a tech issue, we are in front of the most forgiving and understanding people ever. And
We
we always
really are.
ourselves that. So I think I just want to shout out and thank everyone who made the conference possible, whether it's fellow FRI staff or our presenters and our keynote speakers and our attendees and just everyone who supports the Fred Rogers Institute as we continue Fred's legacy.
We invite you to save the date for our 2027 fifth annual Work of Fred Rogers conference. We have officially set the dates for July 12th, 13th, and 14th. That's a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And yes, you heard that right, 3 days, because we have added in a pre-conference day that is a little extra special something on that Monday, July 12th. And then our normal 2 days of our conference will be on Tuesday, July 13th and Wednesday, July 14th. So keep those dates, July 12th, 13th, and 14th, 2027 in mind. Get it marked on your calendar now. Registration will be open all the way at the beginning of 2027, so that's a really far way away, but please keep those dates in mind. And keep in mind that our call for proposals for that 2027 Work of Fred Rogers conference will be open at the end of this 2026 calendar year. In the fall, we'll release some information when those call for proposals are open, and we really hope that you'll consider submitting something and or attending next year's conference, and we would be so grateful to see you there.
The Fred Rogers Institute advances the legacy of Fred Rogers by investing in the strengths of families and caring adults to support the healthy development of children. To learn more about the Fred Rogers Institute and our initiatives, visit fredrogersinstitute.org and follow the Fred Rogers Institute on Instagram, Facebook, and X.